Welcome all to today's webcast. I hope you all had a lovely summer and you're back at work full of energy and motivation for some amazing and fantastic customer success outcomes. Our webcast team has also had a well-deserved break, but we're back today with Tom Carnewal telling us about advancing CS operations through the use of CRM technology. We're very, very lucky to welcome Tom today, who's not only a friend and a member of the Customer Success Network, but also a valued leader of the teams of many companies from plenty of different backgrounds. In fact, Tom has over 20 years of experience in the IT and SaaS industry, from sales and marketing to engineering and economics, and finally returning to his love, software. He has implemented CRM, success, and marketing automation platforms at companies such as actionable, Zalando, Samsung, and many, many others. And if this wasn't enough of a biography for you, let me tell you from a trusted source we know that in his spare time, Tom is a keen scuba diver and skier, and also a true wine connoisseur. So amongst customer success and those hobbies, I'm sure you have something to learn from him today. Over to our topic for today. In recent months, the conversations around how to choose the best tool to manage your current customer data and demographics and how to set it up in the most optimal way for your business has truly accelerated. We hear about more and more customer success organizations turning to the powers of CRM technology to automate and scale their operations. We all seem to be clear that without a true understanding of customer data and processes, is it difficult to act on changes in the behavior of customers and to keep the rest of the business in the loop with important customer updates. Many questions remain open when it comes to choosing and setting up a CRM system for the purposes of CS. Is your organization large or mature enough to begin using a CRM system? How do you select the best tool? And most importantly, how do you set it up and promote it to your team so that you take the best out of it? Today, Tom will give us his top tips on these questions and many, many more. This webcast is hosted by the Customer Success Network, and I am your host, Morika Georgieva. I'm a part of the Customer Success Network and a Customer Success Manager at Beamery. As a reminder, after the summer holidays, as always, we try to keep this webcast as interactive as possible. So please post your questions in the QA and in the chat boxes, and we are going to be answering them at the two pauses that we've planned for today, one in the middle and one at the end of the webcast. We're going to be broadcasting live in our workplace community, where you'll be able to see the webcast in the future and also take a look at Tom's slides. So without further ado, Tom, I'm so excited to have you with us. Over to you.
Thank you, Morika, for this lovely introduction. I'm Tom. For my part as well, welcome all of you to this webinar. Just as Morika, I hope you enjoyed your summer holidays, and we're all set and ready to go for today's webinar. As Morika told you, I have mainly a background in the IT world with a high focus on customer service, customer operations, and customer success management. Today, I'm head of digital transformation at Dun & Bradstreet Altaris, which you might know as a data and technology provider for a lot of companies throughout the world. And I'm also a founding partner of Certables, a SaaS startup from the Brussels area. So let's jump to today's subject. How can we empower customer success through our CRM technology? Before we jump into that, let's agree on two fundamental definitions. First of all, what are we talking about when we talk about CRM technology? Well, first of all, it is a technology that we use to manage all of our relationship and interactions with our customers and prospects. So it is a technology, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking about a structured Excel sheet or the most complicated Salesforce instance. It could be SaaS, it could be on-premise, it doesn't matter. It's a technological platform, and we use it to manage the relationships and the interactions. So not just master data, but also data on the actions you undertake with your customers, and maybe even some transactional data like usage or invoicing data or whatever. And most important, it's about customers. Today, we focus on customers. We do not focus on the pre-sales part with leads and opportunities and prospects. We focus on existing or new customers. Secondly, what are we talking about when we talk about CSM management? Customer success management is used for a lot of things, and it covers a lot of subjects. People often tell me, well, Tom, CSM is difficult to define. Well, honestly, I don't think it's difficult to define. It's just that people tend to use or abuse it for certain things. Customer success management is basically all of the activities you deploy to assure your customer successfully uses your product or service so that the next renewal becomes a no-brainer. So a couple of things here as well. First of all, it's about activities. So it's not about technology, it's about activities. Secondly, it's about the success of your customer. Again, we focus on the customer and the success. That success should lead us to a seamless renewal. So that means if you're not in the renewal business, you probably will be doing some kind of account management or customer support or customer service, but customer success is probably not your thing. Customer success typically is related to the renewal business, and it doesn't matter whether it is a product or a service, online or offline, that doesn't matter. You're in the renewal business. Why is CRM then, why is customer success so important to the renewal business? Well, because most of the businesses in the renewal market, they have more than 80% of their turnover coming from renewals. So customer success, the fact that your customer successfully uses your product or service is of the utmost importance. Without customer success, no renewals, and then you might lose a lot of your business. Why is CRM technology important? Well, because we focus on our customer, and in today's world with multi-channel ways of communication, it is very important that you keep this 360-degree view on your customer. So this is why we both have CRM and CSM combined together. Now, before you know what exactly you will need, what your customer success needs are, let us see what defines the needs of your customer success. I found out throughout the years that there's basically 3 dimensions that define your customer success needs. First of all, there's the maturity of your company. There is a difference between a startup and a full mature company. Secondly, there is the complexity of your org, right? The more complex, the more different your customer success will be. And there is your business model. Your business model will also influence the way you will do customer success. Okay, let's take a closer look at that. First of all, the maturity of your company. Well, it is obvious that startups, scale-ups, and mature companies all have different needs and means when it comes to customer success, right? When is the exact time to start your CRM? Well, honestly, regardless of whether you're a startup, a scale-up, or a mature company, it's now. You should already be doing it, right? So that's the only thing that basically counts for all types of companies. You should already be doing CRM. When is the right time to start CSM? Same thing. Start from the very beginning. The only difference, of course, is that when you're a startup, everybody is doing customer success. I mean, you're maybe 2, 3, 4 people in your startup. All of you will be doing customer success. When is the right time to have dedicated customer success managers? That's a more difficult one. Usually it turns around like this critical number of 10, 11, 12 people in your company. That's when you start splitting off dedicated CSM roles. But again, it will depend on your market and your business. So when do you start CRM? Now, when do you start CSM? From the very beginning. Who does the CSM? Well, I just answered that question. In the beginning, it will be everybody. The more your company or your organization gets mature, the more you will have dedicated CSMs with dedicated teams and probably a dedicated team leader. Right? What CSM activities does your CRM need to support? Again, maturity of your company will pretty much have an influence on that. If you're a startup company, onboarding is very important for you because you're getting in a lot of new customers. So you will want to measure the success of the onboarding you're doing with your customers. Then in the next phase, customer support is getting important because you just got all these new customers on your product or your service, and now you need to support them. If you're a true scale-up, you will have to follow up. You will have to make sure they start using it, and if they keep on using it. And where do you have to add additional programs to make sure that your customers keep on using your product or service? And then the next phase, the renewal gets important. So for a lot of scale-ups and mature companies, renewal business is so important that it's the biggest focus they have in CSM. But the real mature companies, they also have a lot of up and cross-sell activities because they want to turn this customer experience into business, right? So they will also want to track this in their CRM system, right? The nature of the activities also plays a role. And startups usually are more in a reactive mode, where scale-ups and especially mature companies will try to be in a more proactive mode, right? They will try to prevent the churn. Your analysis needs, the more mature and the more complex your company gets, the more you want to do analysis. That brings us to the complexity of your organization. It's not just about the org chart of your company, right? Of course, the number of people in your company defines a certain degree of complexity, but it's also the number of customers and the number of products or services you have in your portfolio. The second thing is, how will you measure success, right? The more complex your company is, the more complex your definition of success will be, right? Some people will define success just simply when the renewal is there. Others will have a full set of KPIs with net promoter scores and customer satisfaction and all that to define success, right? So the more complex your organization will be, the more measurements you will have, and the more data you will need to store, and the more intelligence you will have to add to it. Yeah, we just mentioned the metrics. We mentioned complex companies, complex orgs with dedicated CSM teams will have quarterly business reviews. We usually call them quarterly success reviews because we don't want our success managers to be real salespeople. So we call it quarterly success reviews rather than quarterly business reviews. This is not something you will do as a startup, because as a startup, you're up to your eyes in selling your product or your service. But once you get more mature, customer success report or quarterly business reviews, sorry, are the way to go. And yeah, I already briefly touched it. The more mature your org gets, the more you will focus on the retention rather than churn. Now, how do you trigger those actions? Also, that is very important. In not so complex organizations, that will often be a manual trigger. Maybe somebody tells you that the customer is not satisfied, or you had a customer on the phone telling you that it's not, that he or she was not satisfied. But in more complex organizations, that information might come in through different ways. So again, your CRM system is at the core of all that. And that information that you have in there, you should use it to trigger actions, right? And then last but not least, I said the business model influences your CS needs. If you're more focused on renewal than on new biz, your CS needs will be way more complex. I already briefly explained that startups have a higher focus on new biz than mature organizations have. I'm working for both right now, and just to give you an idea, the mature org I'm working for, they have more than 90% of their turnover coming from renewals. In the new biz org I'm working for, we actually are at 60-65. So you see the difference. So that will need a different way and a different approach. Also, the fact whether you sell just licenses or licenses and services, or maybe just services, influences your customer success needs. And then also high end versus low end. how easy to implement and to use is your product. The more low-end customers you have, the lower your customer success needs will be. So all in all, as a rule of thumb, you could say, if you're a startup with a pretty easy org structure and a straightforward business model, basic CRM or even Excel sheet could do the trick. If you have a structured Excel sheet, there's nothing wrong with that for as long as it serves the purpose. And that purpose is how to onboard your customers. If you select a CRM, it's not the purpose of this webcast, but if you select a CRM, do bear in mind that you will have future growth, right? So make sure to have a flexible one, right? Make sure that you have a CRM where you can export data in case you want to switch platforms. You can take your data with you. If your org gets more complex, you will move up and scale up your CRM as well, where you might start at the bottom with a Bitrix 24 or any of the free other very quality CRM systems you can find today. You might be going to systems like Pipedrive or whatever, right? Same goes for the maturity of your company. But once you are in that quadrant where your company is getting more complex, your business model is getting refined, and the maturity of your organization is increasing, you will definitely need a robust CRM system that probably will require a dedicated CSM module in there, or maybe a separated CSM tool that you will link to your CRM system. What you would typically see here are combinations of a Salesforce with a churn zero, or Microsoft Dynamics with a Gainsight, or things like that. But there's multiple options, and there's a lot of good CRM systems and a lot of good CSM software in the world. But if you don't have a CSM software right now, don't feel bad. I mean, as I told you, you can really start off with an Excel sheet. It is more important that you, oops, this is my Beamer. Yep, there we are. It is more important that you think of doing customer success than to have a full-fledged CSM platform. I think, Morika, we might just pause it for a second before we jump into 2 real-life cases where I will explain how those 3 dimensions did influence the way we did customer success.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Tom. And yes, it is the time to jump into a quick Q&A session. That was a very interesting first part. I know for myself, I was thinking very closely of what you showed, and I'm running those questions past what we do at Beamery and how that kind of matches our business model. And there's one thing that I was wondering actually, which I think is quite applicable to the majority of CS organizations. Where does the eternal question of segmentation sit in all that? So should we be taking into consideration how many segments we have, whether we have segments, like does that matter?
Does it matter? In the end, no, but you often need it. You often need it because in a moment we will talk about how you will try to automate things. And once you want to start automating things, you usually quite rapidly will go to a segmentation. Segmentation does not only help you to do your customer success management, it will also help you in defining marketing actions and stuff like that. So usually companies tend to reach out to segmentation pretty rapidly because it is very difficult to do a one-size-fits-all. Unless you have nothing but low-end customers that all bring you in $5,000 a year and they all have a 1-year contract, then you don't need to segmentate. But in all other cases, I think you will quite rapidly be forced to segmentate. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that we are thinking about quite often in terms of how do I put customers in the correct bucket, and should that be reflected on my CRM? So I think quite an important question to raise there. And then the other thing that we were wondering is, I think it's very relevant for us to speak about the use of CRM in the context of customer success. But can you spend some minutes just talking about the alignment with our big close friends from sales? So supposedly a CRM system is sometimes used by both of those organizations, and we do know that often we might have a little bit of tension in aligning those needs. And I know that you're somebody who comes from both of those backgrounds. So how do we address that?
Well, the first thing you should not do is see it as a conflict of interest, because it's not. You both have the same interest, and that is the customer, right? But if you are in the renewal business, then you really have to keep this customer success focus. So if you you as a CSM get involved in the entire process, right? If your product or service does not require any implementation project or anything like that, this could just be done after the signing of the contract, and you just pick up the customer and you take it from there. However, if you have a more complex situation with onboarding projects and stuff like that, it might be very useful that the CSM is already involved in the pre-sales part. So this means that your CSM should be involved in important opportunities when they are reaching the last stage. So it is important that you exchange with your sales colleagues on that, and that they accept the fact that that you need to be involved. And this often requires management commitment. So convince your manager that they have to share this view of customer success and that it is a common goal.
Absolutely. It's something that on so many of our webcasts we come back to every time we speak about the collaboration with other departments, that it's a customer success is a philosophy and a mission, not a department. So thank you for reminding us of this very important aspect. I'm starting to be aware of time, so Tom, I'm going to let you continue with two very interesting live use cases. Guys, please do continue to type your questions in the chat box or the Q&A, and we answer them towards the end. Tom, back over to you.
Okay, thank you. So yes, part one was the theory, like, okay, why should you do CRM? Why should you do customer success? And how can you define your customer success needs? And what does that mean in terms of a CRM platform? The second part, I will focus on two use cases, real life use cases. One is a startup. It's a startup in the technology, so it's a SaaS company. They had their first beta version of their software in 2017. First customer got onboarded in February 2018. Today they have about 1,300 customers, right? Important note there, out of those 1,300 customers, more than 90% is in a freemium. So which means you have a very low added value per customer. That is important to keep in mind, because that means that you cannot put a lot of human effort in it to onboard people and to keep track of them. Today, they employ 2 half-time employees and 4 freelancers. As a CRM platform, they use Bitrix 24. But as I mentioned before, there's tons of others out there that are suitable. The advantage of Bitrix 24 is that up to 5 users, it's for free. So the basic version is for free up to 5 users. So if you're looking into something that as a startup with little cash and you still want to do CRM, this might be worth looking at it. They don't have any CSM platform, so because they don't have the money for it. It's as simple as that. And on top of that, they don't have any dedicated CSMs for now. As you can see, 2 half-time people and 4 freelancers, there's no CSM in there. However, from day one, they wanted to do customer success because they are in the renewal business and they know how hard it is to make customers. So what activities did they deploy? They had a high focus on onboarding. They had a high focus on onboarding, and they have a cycle of 4 emails which are being sent out from their software. So it doesn't come from the CRM system, it comes from the software. which depending on whether or not you logged in and you've started using the tool, you would get different messages. So the messages are kind of like personalized. Now, if you can't send out emails from your own platform or software, you usually can do CRM have this functionality that doesn't fit, or your Chimp is up to a certain degree for free, and so are other email blasters, so you could use those. And you could link it all together using a platform like Zapier. So there are free alternatives if you don't have a lot of cash to spend. Don't worry. So that's the first thing they did. They have like these more or less personalized or at least workflow-based emails which they send out to their newly onboarded users to make sure that they start using the platform. The second thing they do is they upload all of those new users every week in their CRM system. So they export an Excel sheet from their software platform, and they import it into Bittrex 24, which is a very easy manual process. And then they, one by one, they do a follow-up call. So, which is actually within a week after they start using the platform. So as every week they upload the Excel sheet, every week they start calling. They have about 20 new users a week on the average. So that is still manageable. I mean, this is one of the freelance guys who's doing that. So I think he does it like 3 or 4 days a week, a couple of hours, and he calls those new customers. He asks them if everything went well, if there is any problem, and of course he checks if there's any possibility for up and cross sell. So he does basically both at the same time, and they store this in Bittrex 24. Retention is completely manually from the CRM system, and so is the renewal. So they just store begin and end date of the contract, and once the end date comes up, they will do a manual follow-up through their CRM system. So there's still a lot of manual work to be done here. And the next step which they want to do is, of course, they want to start automating this. They don't want to do all this by hand because of, as I told you before, they have more than 90% of their customers are in a freemium model. They don't want to call all those, right? It's way too much work, and it doesn't bring in any money, at least not for now. And they want to start importing the real day-to-day usage so they can trigger flows from that, okay? So this is some basic stuff they've done. The emailing and the follow-up from your CRM system, it is something you can pretty easily do. Now, they don't have any complicated scores yet, which they use to indicate whether or not a customer is feasible to churn or not. So what did they do? This is, by the way, a screenshot of their CRM environment. As you can see, this is pretty basic, right? And they do the calls straight from their CRM system, and so do the emails go out. Well, they actually added one simple field, which you can see at the bottom here. It's a simple field they added, and it's the churn risk. So whenever somebody is in contact with the customer, and as I told you, they follow up on every new user by phone, they will give their personal input in this field, whether they feel good or maybe bad about this customer. How did he react? And do you think he's feasible to churn or not? Now, this might seem ridiculous, but it is not, because you're talking to a human, and it is your feeling about how that customer is doing right now. So this is a very first step in trying to keep track of the churn risk and thus the retention rate of your customers. And what they do is every month they would run a report on this, and they would see what customers are feasible to churn when they are approaching I think it's 3 months from end of contract date, and they will start calling them, right? So this is something everybody could do. It's very easy to implement, and it gives you very rapid return, and it allows you to run stats and analysis on the status of your customer portfolio. So This is a first case, low-end startup who didn't have a lot of money, but did want to do CRM and customer success. The second case is quite the opposite. It's a mature org in the tech branch. They've been around for more than 30 years. They have 25K plus customers, and they have over 40 products. So it's a very complex org. Lots of users. I think they have like almost 500 users of their CRM system, which is Salesforce, by the way. And they have a dedicated CSM system, which is Gainsight. The reason why they bought Gainsight is because Gainsight natively plugs into Salesforce. So this is why they decided for Gainsight. Before you get all enthusiastic, there's also a downside about Gainsight, and that's the price. Think before you leap, it's pretty expensive, right? What do they do in terms of customer success? They do all of their onboarding stuff through customer success. So they have, as they have 40 plus products, 25K customers, they have a whole bunch, thousands of low-end customers that have very low annual recurring revenue. But they also have this 5% top-notch customers that bring in 7 digits every year. So the difference is huge. The top-notch customers, they have a dedicated CSM. Of course they have, right? And this dedicated CSM will do his utmost best, and he knows his customers by heart, right? He doesn't, so to speak, he or she don't need a system to know their customer. But all of the low-end customers, they want to try to automate all this so they can focus on the customers where they can add value. So they started automating all this, and they have a complete onboarding program that allows them almost automatically with Scenari to onboard all of those low-end customers. For the high-end customers, it is dashboards and stuff like that, which they use, so they can see at one glimpse of an eye how this key account is doing. From a follow-up point of view, a lot of dashboards. So they have really good dashboards. I will give you some of the some screenshots in a moment with crucial data. They have they use 6 different metrics to decide to calculate, sorry, the health score of their customer. So they have Net Promoter Score, they have CSAT, they have the number of tickets, they have the usage, they have payment behavior of the customer, and they have, well, the 6th one just pops out of my mind. But they have 6 different metrics which they use to calculate this score. This is something you can only do if you have a well-organized structure and you capture all the data and you interface it with your CRM system, which then serves as a central data hub for all that. And their CSM system sucks all of that data, both out of the CRM, but also out of their usage database and things like that. Based upon that, a lot of CTAs, so call to actions, get triggered. So their CSMs get automated actions in their calendar or in their Salesforce action tracker based upon certain things. For instance, if a customer signed a contract 3 weeks ago but still hasn't logged in, you should call him, things like that. So they have a lot of automated call to actions. From a retention point of view, they have playbooks in their customer success management tool. Those playbooks allow them to make sure that none of the renewals slips through. So they have those typical playbooks that say, okay, 90 days before renewal, we do this, 60 days before renewal, we do that, 30 days before renewal, we have that. Those playbooks also contain quarterly business reviews and stuff like that. The renewal right now is still manual. So they have this dashboard where all the renewals show up, and there's a manual follow-up of the renewals on the CRM systems, on the Salesforce system. The next steps of what they want to do is they want to automate those more playbooks. Also, they want to upload more products, because right now they've been doing all of this end-to-end for just one product, and they've got 40 products. So they still have a way to go. And they want to automate all of the low-end renewals so that no human needs to interfere there. Well, theoretically that is, because in practice you always have people interfering. Let's take a quick look at what it looks like in their org. This is a general dashboard. As you can see, this is the Gainsight view embedded in Salesforce. This is an overview for an account manager, by the way, because the CSMs were so enthusiastic about the CSM tool. They also opened it up for account managers. So account managers just use it to have a good view on their accounts. These are the different metrics I was talking about. So yeah, okay, this is the one I forgot, the stage they're in. So they have 6 different metrics that allow them to calculate the health score of their customer. And on top of that, if they click on the health score, they would see the history of the health score, why it went up or down. So you have additional information about this. I personally am not a very big believer of Net Promoter Scores. I know a lot of people are, but only Net Promoter Scores that have been defined really good are of a big help. But probably that could be a topic of another webcast, but they wanted the Net Promoter Score, so they have the Net Promoter Score. These are some of the scoring mechanisms they use, without going too much into detail, but you can see there that they have pretty straightforward, but nevertheless intelligent scoring, which they use. By the way, all of this is managed by the business, not by the IT. So this is something you should bear in mind if you start rolling out CS in your CRM, or even if it's in a separated tool. Make sure business is involved. Don't let it be the sole territory of IT. Although I have an IT background, and the first one to say, if you want to have it screwed up, give it to IT. They're going to screw it up. They're going to make it so technical that and so it's going to be very flashy, but probably very useless. So make sure business at least has a say on the backlog of your platform, and preferably, like they have it, business owns it. So they themselves define the rules. Yeah, this is another one. You can hardly see it because I took the screenshot poorly, but it's actually a complete usage report where you can see day by day what the usage is of the tool. So those were 2 completely different types of how companies can do customer success using their CRM system. The first one is very low end. They store their master data on their customers. They make sure they have some very relevant data, like start and end date of the contract, but also they added this little, let's call it customer success touch, with this one single field, which they call churn risk. And the other example was quite the opposite, where you have a very well elaborated, very functional, but also quite complex customer success environment. But what you did see is that, for instance, the churn risk did come back even in this complex one. So although the first one was way simpler than the last one, they have some common touch points. Okay, I'm gonna stop here for now and give the floor back to you, Morika, and the attendees for any questions. But those were just 2 examples to illustrate the theory we had been giving in part 1.
Thanks so much, Tom. These were really 2 very different but equally interesting examples. I myself haven't used those tools in such a way, so it was very interesting for me to see. While you were speaking, some of us were having a quick conversation inside the chat box, so I'd like to get you involved in that. Firstly, we're thinking, if you start as a startup on a smaller system with less functionality, you did mention that you need to keep in mind moving from a smaller to a much more complicated tool. How do you manage that? How difficult is it? We had one of our attendees here, Christy, saying, well, it depends on the customer success manager of the new CRM, which we all know it's true, but what do you need to be prepared for? Like, what happens if you have to change them over?
I always try to keep a couple of standards, and one of them is the tool should be flexible. I mean, if you have everything, or if you buy an out-of-the-box tool where hardly any configuration is possible, which, by the way, is less and less the case, because all of those SaaS platforms, they usually allow you to do a lot of configuration, but especially for on-premise tools, they might just be not very flexible. Stay away from it. If it's not flexible, stay away from it. Secondly, make sure you're the owner of your data, meaning whatever you put in there, master data, transactional data, doesn't matter. Make sure you can get it back at any point in time. So if you're not happy with the tool, or you need to change because the tool does no longer satisfy your needs or whatever, that you can export the data at any time. And by the way, do it on a regular basis. Don't wait until you're not satisfied to do so. And thirdly, take a look at the pricing too, because what might seem as a very cheap tool in the beginning might just turn out to be a nightmare once you have a lot of users. So those are the three main metrics I usually use when I have to select some kind of a CRM platform for a startup. But there's tons of good ones out there. You saw the example of Bittrex24. Another one which we recently used was Pipedrive, for instance. Pipedrive is pretty good. You don't have to go straight away for Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, because it might just be very expensive for you as a startup. But as soon as you start scaling up, it might get interesting to look at those, because those are two examples of big CRM platforms that are flexible and that have a lot of functionality in there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. We had another question that we were discussing here related to the churn risk field that you showed on the first example. So some of us have a bit of a manual process about filling in this field. Others have it a bit more automated. It becomes the value of many other fields combined. So it looks like the process takes quite a long time for everybody. I know we've been figuring this out for a while now, and it sounds like it's the same with some of our attendees. Anna here has tuned. Yeah. So what are when we start to define churn risk, specifically in relation to the CRM, where do you start from? Like, what are the first few things that you think?
Well, the funny thing is, people always tend to look at churn, right? Which is a pretty negative way of looking upon it, because churn is customers running away. I prefer looking at the retention rate, that is customers staying. But then again, you have to, it's just a matter of definitions, and it's all about, do you think a customer will stay or not, or will he or she run away or not? What you described is a typical process. You start with a manual thing, because in the beginning, you don't have a lot of data. That could be because you're a startup, but that could also be because you just started using a system, right? So you don't have a lot of data, so you make it manual. And then what you would gradually see is that people would try to start calculating it. If you calculate it, if you start calculating it, make sure that, first of all, the data you're using for it are reliable. That's number one. And secondly, don't be too dogmatic about it. I mean, don't let it rule everything. Unless you have a very weighted way of calculating the churn risk, let it just be another metric, right? The same goes for net promoter scores, by the way. So don't be too dogmatic with it. It's a metric. It's not the metric. It's not the silver bullet, right? So just use it as one of the triggers that you could use to fire off a program. It is more important that you use your customer success and your customer success tools to be proactive, because that's in the end the big difference between customer success and customer support or customer service. You want to be proactive. You want to make sure this customer is successful. So try to look towards the future. When you just look at the churn or the churn risk, that is pretty reactive, right? Try to be proactive. Like, okay, my customer bought a contract, a 1-year contract with me that allows him to download 24 movies. If after 1 month, my customer has only downloaded 1 movie, well, he's lacking on his pace report for that year, because he actually bought 24 movies, and I would expect him to download at least 2 movies a year, because let's be honest, we hope that he will download the 24 movies within 4 months, so he will buy an extra bundle, right? So that's what we hope. So if he's lacking on the pace report, this should trigger some proactive action, right? Why is he only downloading 1 movie? Doesn't he like your offer? Is the way to download a movie maybe too complex? Is it too cumbersome? So try to be proactive. That churn thing it's a nice little flag, but nothing more than that.
Absolutely. I think that's a great lesson in terms of act before it's too late, which is the big philosophy of customer success. And we have some more questions here. So who does that? You did mention that we don't want to leave that entirely to IT, but I'm sure that every single customer success manager, if you ask them how you are, they're probably going to answer busy. So when do we start thinking about bringing somebody in specifically to manage our tools and to look at our processes?
So you mean when would you start looking at like a dedicated CSM platform or something like that?
Perhaps maybe like a person who manages that. So when do we start looking at somebody, for example, from customer success operations coming in, on someone else who's dedicated to look after your CRM and CSM tools in particular?
Yeah, well, ideally from the beginning, but that's usually not possible because your CSMs are overloaded with work. But try to find this key user, this key CSM, who's really keen on trying out new things and bringing the team forward. We usually all have one in our team, or maybe you are that one person, and just go to your team leader and tell him, hey, boss, if you call him or her boss, hey, I would like to do this. I have ideas about this. How could we do that? Maybe in the first phase, you will have to list your ideas and give them to IT, so IT will do it for you. But the further you go, and once people see that it has an added value, they will start trusting you. And then maybe in the next step, you can try to claim the ownership of it. But I do agree, it is a constant battle. It's a constant battle with IT, especially if you are in a pretty classic company where people work in silos. If you are in a more matrixed organized company, this will not be an issue. IT people will love to discuss with you, and they will want to hear what you want to have. But if you're not that lucky and your IT people are not so open to listen to you, then you might just list your ideas and give them some user stories.
Absolutely. And we have one last question here. How do you keep the motivation of customer success managers to be on the CRM or the CSM system? I suppose, how do we prove the value to our team that we're giving them one more system for them to manage their customers?
Well, this is the reason why you would use the CRM system, because it's usually already there. So it's not an additional system. The example I gave you with the Gainsight implemented in Salesforce, that is the main reason why they went for Gainsight, because fits completely into their Salesforce, and the CSMs don't have the feeling that they have yet another system, right? It's for them, it's part of their CRM. But how do you keep them motivated? Listen to them. Listen to them and ask your CSMs, what do you need to make your life easier? And this is, and I come back to the same point. This is why you shouldn't leave it to IT, because IT, with all my respect, and I used to be one of them, they don't have a clue what a CSM needs to improve his or her life. So listen to your CSMs and don't go for the big revolution. Do it step by step. You've seen the example of the guys with their Bitrix 24 environment. That's a little step, but for a CSM purpose, it serves perfectly well your purpose, and people like it. So they keep on using it because it will show them what customers they have to pay attention to. So listen to your users and make sure that what they need, what they would like to see, put it in there and do it step by step. Don't ask a 6-month development. Just ask one little thing which they can put in their next Salesforce release that usually comes out within a couple of weeks. So
amazing. And I did say it was the last question, but I lied because we've had one more come in, and I'll use the last 5 minutes for that. So it's more related to kind of how you keep engaged with your users and how you make sure that you're automating enough and you're automating the right things. So Anna here is asking, if your users registered and they haven't been active for a month, how many do you think personal emails are needed as reminders for your customers? So far, she's been sending 3 emails, one sent on the 7th day, one on the 14th, and then one on the 25th. Is that too many?
Well, of course, it depends on the product or the service you're selling, right? But from a general point of view, I would say no, that is not too many. But what you might try to do is try to analyze those emails. I mean, most of the email tools that send out emails allow you to check whether an email has been read or been opened, right? Try to get those metrics and see if people actually, first of all, get your emails, and secondly, read your emails. If they don't read them, you should try working on things as the subject and the content, right? Because the opening rate is not good, right? So you should do some classical things about the opening rate of your emails, but don't start spamming them. I mean, getting a higher frequency on the number of emails you send out is not gonna higher the opening rate. Forget it. It's just gonna irritate people and they will mark you as a spammer. So the last thing you should do is start raising the frequency and the number of emails you send, because it's not gonna help. Work on subject, work on content, and try to figure out why people don't read your emails. And you know how you can find that out? Call your user. Call them and ask them. And this is not a joke. Just, I have never had a user in my life, a customer in my life, when I called them and asked them what they thought about this or that, or if they could help me with hiring the opening, with getting a better opening rate on my emails. I have never had one customer who said, I don't want to talk to you. Never. People want to help. Just tell them, just ask them if they want to help you. People usually want to help. You would be surprised. So just ask your customers why they don't open your emails.
Amazing. Well, we have a thank you for Anna. Thank you, Anna, for your question as well. I think these were the questions that we had for today. Tom, thank you so much for your insights and the fantastic examples and sharing so much of your experience. You are a customer hero indeed. I'm sending my thanks to you, all of our attendees. You can see Tom's contact details on the screen. We're going to be posting his slides on the workplace community where the recording is already, and you can already access it and send it to anybody else who you think might be interested. Again, thank you for everybody who attended. Watch out for our topic for October, which is also a very, very interesting one. I'll leave you with that. Have a fantastic afternoon or morning, wherever you are on the globe. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for having me.